So, if you remember, last week we explored the idea of borders as filters, or we explored the so-called, or what we called, the double imperative of border management, the need to foster, facilitate, enable, reduce frictions for the movement of authorized legal commodities and peoples across the border, while at the same time preventing, restraining, attempting to block or to stop any unauthorized entry. Today we explore the first part of this. I mean, if you remember, we're going to kind of disaggregate that double imperative over the next 2 weeks. And so today we look at the first part of this. We try to understand what are the rationales behind the idea of fostering and enabling circulation. And so in a sense, we go a bit more in depth compared to last week. I mean, we presented the overall imperative or double imperative as purely in terms of what is authorized and what is not authorized, what is legal and illegal. These weeks, this one and the next two, we're going to try and think about the forces that shape each of these components, and we try to understand a bit more in depth what kind of border management policies and practices are put in place to do so. So under the heading Fostering Circulation, we're going to try to explore why the idea of opening borders has been and continues to be, with a small question mark that we leave to the end, and continues to be one of the main drivers for border management policies driven by development. So here we're going to try and think of the relation between the management of borders, or certainly the idea of opening up borders, in its relation to the development objective of increasing economic growth or achieving development through the development of the economy as such. So the main topic for today, or the main force that we're going to try and sketch the background for this set of policies, is the idea that trade and investment are the engines for development. And we're going to kind of use the usual format, or the formats that I introduced last week, presenting first why borders are seen as a problem, why are they seen as an impediment to trade and investment, and also think about borders as a solution, looking at specifically at the border measures and behind the border measures. In the final part of this session, we will think about the forces that animate, or the interpretation of these border management policies from various perspectives, right? So there is going to be 4 different videos. This is the first part, and we're going to kind of just introduce the theme here. So economic integration is both a mean and an objective for development, right? And that means that the idea that economic growth in any country is produced by a deeper integration into the global economy has been dominant since the 80s, since effectively the era of structural adjustment programs. Within that kind of circular way of thinking, whereby by integrating into the global economy, you automatically get to the objective of increasing economic growth rates, well, we can find a parallel version or the same circularity of ideas in terms of thinking about borders as both a problem and a solution, or more precisely, the way in which borders are managed as a problem and as a solution. And the starting point for us is really to go back, perhaps, I'm not going back to the 1980s and theories of comparative advantage and neoliberal ideas about global integration. I'm thinking, I want to start from 2002 and the idea of financing for development that were of concern at that time. I mean, The Monterrey Consensus was the first major meeting where the idea that development needed to be financed via trade and investment came to be formulated and agreed upon by all participants. So here, the main idea behind this was the fact that ODA cannot, ODA being Overseas Development Assistance, cannot by any means be enough to finance development projects and interventions, and that the only real way in which countries, developing countries, can accelerate their economic growth is by opening up their markets to foreign direct investment, financial investment and capital investment in productive economies. So this slide, which is very thick, is kind of an executive summary where I underlined in bold some of the key points I wanted to think about, and you can read it. I'm not going to explain it in depth. Kind of points to that idea. We need to mobilize and increasing the effectiveness of financial resources, and for that we need sound policies. We need to promote international trade as an engine of development, and that requires ensuring that the necessary internal conditions are put in place, right? So within the belief that, and this is the last paragraph in the slide, a universal rule-based, open, non-discriminatory, and equitable multilateral agreement as a meaningful trade to liberalization can substantially stimulate development. Behind that, you can see how the emphasis is put first on sound policies, of which border management policies, the ones that we will look at today, are crucial and fundamental. Second, how this moves beyond the border and talks about ensuring the necessary internal conditions. And we will see how effectively kind of reducing differentiation between jurisdictions, or put differently, homogenizing the kind of playing field in which global financial flows can move, is the crucial objective of this set of policies. Beyond that, you can see how a whole set of different actors have agreed and taken up that idea, and indeed participate into those same policy recommendations. So here is a graph that shows you what I meant by thinking about facilitating the inflow of foreign direct investment, and why it is considered as the key engine for development. Look at the thickness of the arrows here. This is ODA, Overseas Development Assistance. I hope that you can see the pointer. Let me just point it, maybe do like this. So ODA, Overseas Development Assistance. This is NGO flows, other official flows, and this is private flows, foreign direct investment. So put like this, it is kind of clear, or at least undeniable, the logic behind the suggestion that the more a country is open to foreign direct investment, the more it will benefit and the more it will be able to finance its own internal growth. The World Development Report of 2009, concerned with economic geography, or indeed, as the title says, with reshaping economic geography, makes a similar point. And it's actually specifically concerned with the set of sound policies, quote unquote, that are necessary for achieving these objectives. In fact, it starts, and this is an interesting kind of set of paragraph or excerpt that I took from that report. He says, where it says that borders and divisions are not symptoms. In fact, they say, look, borders are not a problem. The problem lies with border management. And why are borders not a problem? Well, because national borders enclose people with shared characteristics. They probably didn't take week 3 of this course. And they provide a sense of place and belonging that contributes to social welfare, maybe. It's up to you to think whether this is an accurate reflection of what goes on across countries in the world. Perhaps more interestingly, they kind of come clean and they generate manageable units for governing society. Well-defined and settled, and well-defined and settled, they provide security and stability, right? Divisions, that's their problem. Borders are not a problem. Divisions are the problem. Arise when borders are poorly managed. Those divisions range from moderate restrictions on the flow of goods, capital, and people to more severe divisions. And that's why borders are not a problem in themselves. But the consequences for economic development are quite different when countries separated by those borders are integrated in a functional economic community, and they use the Czech Republic and Slovakia as an example, or divided by conflict, and they use Ethiopia and Eritrea as an example. Now, obviously, we can entertain a large discussion of whether these examples hold true, or whether it is possible even to think about comparisons between these two contexts. I leave it like that. I just wanted to highlight two things. First, how, once again, the idea behind all of this is that it's about the management of borders. It's about opening, closing them. It's about the way in which borders distort the invisible hand of the market, if you wish, the way in which they distort, increasing the costs, or indeed even the time that it takes for commodities, people, ideas to cross a borders. Viewed through an economic lens, the last paragraph in this slide says, some borders are much wider than others. And the wider the borders are, the country limits trade, travel. I'm sorry, but with my image I cannot read accurately, so I let you read the last paragraph in the slide. In fact, probably you will have to download the slides to read the last paragraphs. Borders are not a problem. Divisions are a problem. And the most attentive among you would have seen how there are strong parallels to videos that we showed last week, in particular the AUBP and the BOMCA video. First paragraph ultimately talks about the sanctity of borders and the need for well-defined, well-demarcated borders so that we can all agree on what is mine, what is yours, and then intervene upon it. What the problem are the distortions, what the kind of problems that borders bring are the distortions that are associated to the divisions that they create. So the problem is one of managing borders, and therefore we need to devise a set of borders interventions that are crucial to achieve those objectives, to reduce divisions while confirming the sanctity of borders. And here it's a visual representation of that thickness. The problem are thick borders, borders that impede a natural and free flow of commodities and peoples, that increase the costs, be they monetary costs or even costs in terms of time and the time needed to cross the border. Here is again a confirmation of what I just said and the ways in which some of those graphs are calculated. What is of concern here are issues such as access to markets, efficiency of customs administration, transparency of border administration, availability of and quality of transport infrastructure and of transport services, the use of ICTs, I mean technology, information communication technology, but also beyond the border, or behind the border rather, regulatory environment and the physical security of all involved, right? So here, this is like a table taken from the World Economic Forum report. It is clear what are the concerns: costs, delays, and the way in which they affect the volume of cross-border commodities or investment that can move across borders, and the risks involved, right? So again, security and protection paramount also in this sense, right? And it's not only about thinning borders. I mean, a lot of it is about reducing those divisions by thinning borders. I mean, if you accept that the problem is defined in terms of border thickness, the solution becomes obvious. It's about thinning those borders. It's about, first, providing market access. And in a sense, that is not new. I mean, already structural adjustment programs ultimately were about providing market access to foreign companies and foreign investment. What is added here is perhaps things related to border administration. Again, at the border measures, some of which we explored last week and some of which we will look at today, become crucial. Efficiency of customs administration, efficiency of procedure for import and export, transparency, which in World Bank jargon means lack of corruption, but also a whole set of other issues that go, again, well beyond the border line itself, about telecom and transport infrastructure, about the business environment, about the physical security for exchange. And so this is important both in an immaterial sense in terms of costs and decisions or risks and returns to capital in relation to the risks involved, but it's also important in a very material sense in most parts of the world when it's not about financial flows, but actually the movement of commodities. Well, a crucial aspect is about reducing the time that it takes to move a bunch of tomatoes from one place to another, to export or to take minerals from their mines to the main port, to the places where they will be used to produce our, I don't know, mobile phones or laptops, right? So here the concern is also with the speed at which cross-border movement takes. So we will look at both of these issues in terms of the speed and that it takes to cross the border, as well as the regulatory environment and the concerns that extend beyond the border line in the following part.